Could a second civil war break out in the United States? A24's release of Civil War 2 weeks ago discusses just that. Welcome back to Azimuth Podcast. I'm Kimberly McNabb, and with me is Barrett McNabb. So, Barrett, what did you think about the movie?
Well, I knew that we wanted to do a review of the movie, so I was trying to enjoy it, but I was also taking notes because we only had one shot to look at it to get as much information as possible. So I really want to see it again so that I can do it, but I'm not going to pay $30 for us to go to the movie theater to see it again. But you know, it has a lot of great character and story building in the slow moments and great camera work and sound in the action moments. And I really am super impressed with it. The film had a budget of $50 million. And which is a fraction of budgets that most movies have these days. And it's already done almost $90 million in sales, so that they have almost a $40 million profit. But you would not be able to tell that it was a low-budget film just because of all of the great camera work. In fact, some of the actors in some of the scenes where there's lots of people milling around, they didn't even know where the cameras were. Right. Because people were kind of hiding, and a lot of people had cameras, and so they didn't know which ones were actually the real movie cameras. But what did you think, Kimberly?
It was interesting, a little confusing about how California and Texas would get together. I think that's what a lot of people's first thoughts are. And then I was like, who are these men with funny rainbow hair and nail polish and red glasses that look like they belong on the Queen and Alice in Wonderland? I mean, so it was a little confusing, but right. I mean, I thought it was well done. But I imagine with your military strategy, brain, you probably read way more into it than I did.
Yeah, I mean, I was really, like I said, I was trying to not only enjoy the movie, but I was also trying to take notes and to be able to talk about it later on and to see what some of the hidden meanings were. I think this would be something that's going to be dissected for a while, and there's obviously a lot of YouTube videos that are out there about the movie, and we went and saw it together, and we both had pen and paper, and we're taking notes and stuff like that. But let's talk about the premise. We came into the movie in the midpoint to end of what turns out to be a major civil war where the United States has fractured into three coalitions. You have the Western forces led by Texas and California, the Florida Alliance, and the remaining United States of America. So a group of journalists want to take a road trip from New York City to Washington, D.C. in order to interview the president. So let's go ahead and watch the preview if you haven't already seen it.
19 states have seceded.
The United States Army ramps up activity.
The White House issued warnings to the Western forces as well as the Florida Alliance.
The three-term president assures the uprising will be dealt with swiftly.
Let me know if you want to try anything on.
I guess aware there's like a pretty huge civil war going on all across America.
We just try to stay out. With what we see on the news, seems like it's for the best.
Citizens of America.
The so-called Western forces of Texas and California
have suffered a very great defeat at the hands of the United States military.
Mr. President, do you regret the use of airstrikes against American citizens?
So already we're seeing, some of the things that this particular president is doing, to American citizens, and so we can see already there's this foreshadowing. This is probably a bad guy. Let's keep going.
We're moving to D.C. today.
We need to go down there.
They shoot journalists on sight in the Capitol. Every instinct in me says this is death. Blooded.
Every time I survived a war zone, I thought I was sending a warning home. Don't do this. But here we are.
There's some kind of misunderstanding here. What? Well, you're American, okay?
Okay. What kind of American are you? You don't know?
The Western forces will reach the White House on July 4th.
So, obviously that scene with what you're talking about, the guy with the rose-colored glasses, pink glasses, whatever, that's been well played on YouTube and things like that, because it's such a dramatic, question to ask. What kind of American are you? And so that was just a really dramatic scene, and it's obviously a lot longer and more violent than what it's showing in the preview, but still, we're seeing this confrontation, and it's obviously there's a civil war going on, and so which side are you supporting?
Oh my God!
Get in the car! Get in the car! Move, move, move!
You're gonna hang back.
I'm not hanging back.
One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Go, 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 go!
God bless America.
So we paused it a couple of times because we didn't want to get a copyright strike on YouTube. Although this being a commercial, I would think that A24 would definitely be loving the fact that they're getting free advertising, with us projecting their commercial to our YouTube audience. But still, we wanted to make sure that
you never know.
You never know. And so we did stop it a couple of times.
So who are the good guys and who are the bad guys? I mean, that's a hard question to kind of figure out in this movie. So here's what we know. The president is in his third term and has conducted airstrikes on his very own civilians. And who has alluded to or threatened F-15s?
Yeah. So do you remember this?
If you need to work about taking on the federal government, you need some F-15s. You don't need an AR-15. I am going to get assault weapons banned. I did it once. I'm going to do it again.
Yeah. So, I mean, here we go. We have Biden himself saying and alluding to, F-15s if you're trying to take on the federal government, which could be, that he's thinking about using them on us. I mean, who knows? I mean, why did he make that comment? But we took some notable screenshots of the trailer. And again, we couldn't take screenshots of the movie because obviously you're not allowed to record a movie, in the movie theater and things like that. But we took some screenshots from the trailer, and it will be able to provide context to you. So the first is the television reflection, and we're going to put these photographs up. The first is the television reflection on the window showing the 19 states that succeeded. And so it's it basically lays it out of who the 19 states are, who's the different factions. And so I studied the photo for a long time and recreated the map to show you what it looks like. And we're putting it up here so you can see what the Western forces, the Florida Alliance, and then the Loyalist states are. And I shaded them for ease of use. But we can see, where the conservative and it's interesting because they kind of jumbled it up a little bit because they're in the red area are definitely states that are conservative. But who knows? So anyway, this is the first kind of clue. Next, we don't see any unit patches on any of the uniforms in the movie. However, in the trailer, we see one unit insignia on a CH-47 Chinook helicopter, and we have it up here. And in the movie, now you see lots of close-ups of the insignia, but it's the 1st Cavalry Division out of Fort Hood, Texas. And it's the unit that's leading the assault on Washington, D.C. And so we don't get to see, again, you come in at the middle or tail end of the Civil War, so you don't get to see the lead up of how that happened, but still, we do, that's the only insignia, and it's painted on the front of the helicopter. And then finally, we see the Boogaloo Boys fighting the U.S. government forces wearing their Hawaiian shirts under their body armor, right? And the Boogaloo Boys are right-wing leaning, and this, they are wanting and believe in that there will be a civil war. So with them fighting the government forces, it leads me to believe that it is a Democrat president and the conservative forces are seeking to eliminate him and his war crimes. I mean, he's already serving a third term, which is against the Constitution. He's been doing airstrikes on civilians, and so that's kind of what led me to believe that it's a Democrat liberal president, and the conservatives are fighting to depose him.
Yeah, I've listened to other reviews of the movie, and they're like, well, they don't really make it obvious, if the president is, Democrat or Republican, if he's like Trump or Biden. And I think you and I have come up with some good arguments for one way or the other.
Right. Now, the crew and the director didn't want it to be obvious
anyway.
and because they didn't want to alienate half of their potential audience.
Exactly.
So they
buy movie tickets.
Yeah, exactly. So they said that that it's not political and it was supposed to be ambiguous on purpose. But if you start looking at the evidence, it shows that or a reasonable person would be able to believe that it is conservatives fighting against liberals in this particular thing.
Well, so for a more generic movie review, the main cast has Kirsten Dunst playing as an experienced combat photojournalist named Lee Smith, along with her reporter-producer Joel, played by Wagner Mora, and Stephen McKinley as an older reporter named Sammy. They even have Nick Offerman from Parks and Recreation playing the president.
Which I thought was an interesting... He cleans up well from his days on Parks and Recreation, but he does a good job of playing the president. But all of those people that you just listed, they get the most screen time. Mm-hmm. But I think the main character is a young aspiring photographer named Jesse, played by Kaylee Spaney. And I think in looking at the various characters, I truly think, even though she gets the least amount of not the least amount of screen time, but obviously the big name actors get more screen time than her. But I think the story is truly about her.
Right. Yeah, Michael Knowles did a review, and he described it as a road trip story.
Sure.
But you say it's a story of two evolutions.
Yeah, I mean, so you have the little girl, the aspiring photographer. She starts off, in a scene where she's exposed to dead people, and she just freezes. And she's so scared. She doesn't take out her camera to take any photographs. And we see her progress from being that scared, aspiring photographer into a risk taker and a battle-hardened photojournalist. And so really it's seeing her progression as she goes through. And then obviously the backstory is the progression that the United States is going through, via the Civil War and the combat and stuff like that.
Yeah. What were some odd things that you thought that were said? Like for me, the older gentleman said that, the Florida Alliance and Texas and California, all these other entities, once they do overthrow D.C., they'll kill each other. What do you think?
Yeah, so basically, I mean, obviously they're different factions, and I think you said that they'll start fighting each other. So you have the Florida Alliance, which if you looked in the map, and we'll put it up again, Texas is bordering the Florida Alliance, and it's geographically separated from all of the other states that are in the Western forces, right? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of it's interesting that Texas didn't join the Florida Alliance, from the outright. But again, I think this was deliberate to kind of jumble up what would normally be blue states and red states in order to try and stave off any politicization of what it is.
Right, yeah, exactly, because otherwise California and Texas don't make any sense.
Yeah, they're not kind of strange bedfellows in this film.
And then, spoiler alert, but in one of the earlier scenes, someone runs into a crowd that's waiting for water waving an American flag and, blows up the crowd. And it takes place in New York City. And so it's like, wait a minute, that is the United States. So why would they bomb themselves?
Yeah, that was again, it was a suicide bomber, and New York State is part of the Loyalist states. So it really did seem
so
that
if
that was
anyone's
disjointed.
divided, I would say it's the United States.
Yeah, exactly.
And then another question we had was Kirsten Dunst's character was credited for rising to fame, after the Antifa massacre, and they didn't expound upon that. Did they do the massacring? Or were they massacred?
Yeah. So I mean, we don't know, which way that goes. Again, the movie wants to keep that ambiguous, but still, that's how she got her chops or famous, was for reporting on that. Now we're going to get into some spoilers, and if you don't want to hear them, skip ahead to the strategy of the war, which is coming up. And I'm going to try and figure out how to do a timestamp so you can just skip that. So again, we're going to be talking about some spoilers. So if you haven't seen the movie, go ahead and skip ahead now, or pause, or if you want to hear them, go ahead. But we'll just give you a couple seconds. Okay.
Yeah. Another thing Michael Knowles said, the wokest element of the movie is that the journalists are not partisan. Kirsten Dunst's character says our only job is to take photos, but I mean, we kind of beg to differ on that.
Yeah, so there was a scene where, as they're camping down and bedding down for the night in their truck, they can see fighting and tracers going off in the distance. And one of the things that I found was interesting is, just from a military standpoint, every country uses different colors of tracers. And so it was interesting to see that it was two sets of red tracers firing at each other. And red is the tracer color that the United States uses. So it's really kind of interesting. The Russians use green tracers. Germany uses silver, I believe. British use blue. And so, it was interesting to see two sets of red tracers being fired at each other, which obviously it's American on American. The next day, they go and actually go up to the fighting. They said, look, we want to check this thing out. The journalist he's an action junkie. You can clearly tell he's excited. Kirsten Dunst is, she's kind of hard to read, actually, because she's kind of, it's like she has lost her passion, and she is just taking photographs as they come. Doesn't matter who it is. But after the Boogaloo Boys battle with the government forces and the Boogaloo Boys win, he is just having a great time talking about the fighting. Oh yeah, you did this. This was cool when you did this, and he's smiling. And so it leads me to believe that he's not partisan, that he actually likes the right wing group, because he's really kind of palling around with them.
Right. Well, also another thing I noticed was, once I figured out who the men with the weird colored hair and the nails are working for the United States side, and yeah, who's going to align more in D.C.? Not so straight cut people these days.
Right. I mean, well, and what they were
straighter cut people that were on the Texas, the Western Forces side.
Yeah, and what he was doing is he was covering up a war crime that was burying civilians that they had massacred. Yep. I mean, it was
going back to the airstrike.
Exactly.
Also, one of the earlier scenes, they're really highlighting how many tents, homeless people live in New York City, and who has really increased homelessness and immigrants to come here? President Biden. So
right.
I would say hints at some partisanship.
And this is kind of interesting. As Lee was asking Jesse, or trying to toughen her up, to be a better combat photojournalist, Jesse asked Lee if she would take a photo of her death in order to capture it and to take advantage of it. And Lee said, yeah, if you die, I'm taking a picture of it. And the interesting flip side is that Jesse took a photo of Lee's death as Lee was saving her in the end scene of the final battle for the White House. And, it was interesting because, as I alluded to, Jesse kept becoming more and more risk-taking as the film progresses on. And so this particular last shot that she was going to get, she went straight up into a corridor where the Western Forces and the Secret Service are having a shootout in the White House, and she's standing in the middle of the corridor trying to take a photograph, and Lee jumps out and pushes her down and then just stands there.
Yeah, that's like, wouldn't you do like a swan dive, which would send both of you to the ground.
Yeah, at the bare minimum, you do a tackle and you take everybody to the ground. But she just stands there, and obviously she's a target and the Secret Service shooter, and she dies. And as she's falling, Jesse is taking photographs of the expression of death on her face. And so it was kind of this little flip, and I'd say the culmination of the character progression of Jesse. But again, the movie never explicitly says what the cause of the war was, and so you're kind of, wondering, California and Texas, how would they team up?
Just a false throw to like, oh, we're not partisan.
Right.
And speaking of partisanship, the scene with the Secret Service person who was trying to negotiate like where the president can go.
The surrender, yeah.
Yeah, she's like, oh, let us go to a neutral country like Greenland or Alaska.
Yeah, that was really kind of interesting. So obviously Alaska has nobody's paying attention to them all the way up there. So they I guess are their own thing. The movie really kind of just takes account for the continental United States, but still, this is a great movie. Again, I want to see it again, just because I didn't get to catch everything because I was just trying to absorb everything. Well, the interesting thing is the left is obviously claiming this is President Trump, the right saying it's Biden. Again, I think we've made a great case to say it's the left.
It's Biden, yes, and also there's no mention of any allies coming to help us, and I would say President Biden has given our allies the signal like, hey, we're not going to come help you, or we're going to talk both sides out of our mouth, trying to appease everyone. And guess what happens when you try to appease everyone, like Israel and Palestinians? You usually end up disappointing everybody. And another thing I'd like to note, for the left who claims, oh, DEI, diversity, blah, blah. No. Who had more diversity on their fighting forces? The United States side had nothing that we saw but white men wearing weird colored hair and fingernail polish. The Western forces had blacks, had black women, had white women, had Asians.
Yeah.
All without being forced by someone else to do it.
Yeah. Overall, I thought it was a great movie. One of the interesting things is continuing the trend of having action scenes and then the music not really syncing with the action scene, almost kind of like Reservoir Dogs. I think Quentin Tarantino was one of the first directors to do this style, to have a serious, dramatic scene, but then have happy music, playing. And so it was definitely a very liberal use, having desynchronized music that doesn't fit the scene in order to make the scene more dramatic. And I thought that was a good use.
Right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in.